Thumbs up from the crew here at the council, the arts team. And so thank you and welcome to this edition of the Randwick Town Hall Takeover. I'm Jack McLain, Sepa Sama, and we're the photographers and artists responsible. If you don't like it, I guess we're responsible. If you do, we did it. Yeah. So thank you for taking your Friday evening and joining us. As we gather together, I would just like to acknowledge the country that we gather on, the country of the Bidjigal and Gadigal peoples. This is also the country that we've created the vast majority of this work on. I'm very grateful for the stewardship that these peoples have exercised with this country for tens of thousands of years. And I would ask that whoever we are, wherever we are in our journey in life, that we would try to take a step that leads us just one step closer to reconciliation. I sometimes feel like, thank you, but I sometimes feel like I don't know how to get my arms around that concept. But if I can just do one thing, something small that gets me closer, that's it. That's all we can all do. So thank you for joining us. And what I'll do this evening is I'm going to talk a little bit about my work, and then I'll hand off to Sepa. He can talk about his portion of the exhibition. And then then we're going to come back and we'll throw ourselves at your mercy, and you can ask any questions you have of us. If I'm not speaking loudly enough for those of you in the back, please let me know. I'll raise my voice. Thank you. So, as a photographer, I think what I'm about is I'm interested in finding questions, and I'm interested in using a camera to try to answer those questions. Now, most of us have a very few number of questions that we ask in our lives, and we tend to keep circling back around and answering those same questions again and again and again. One of the questions that I'm fascinated by is about landscape. When does land become landscape? When does a place become my place? When does a group of people become a community? Those were the questions that interested me. And part of the reason for that was because when I moved back from Melbourne, I landed here in the eastern suburbs, and I'd always lived on the North Shore. And it was really clear to me that it was a very different kind of community. And, you know, when you're new to something, like a couple of immigrants, you notice those differences. So when I first got back up here, I was like photographing all the deco detail on a lot of the apartment blocks and all the buildings and so on. And I was just fascinated with it, but it was clear to me that it went deeper than that. And this project gave me the opportunity to investigate that with a camera and with conversations with people. So that's what I did. As you can see, part of it was me making these portraits with people, and then I would ask people for them. What was it that transforms this place into a community? And I would record those responses, and you see most of them on the wall here. Along with the portraits, I also made these large panoramas. And I used, I've got one of my panoramic cameras over here. I used a couple of the maddest cameras you've ever seen to try to make some of this work. And that's what we ended up with. The way I approached those images, though, for me, was I felt like I was making portraits. I wanted to make portraits of the place and of the land, and not just a pretty landscape picture. I wanted to treat the land itself with the same respect that I was treating everybody whose little instant portrait I made up here. So for me, those were some of the things that I was working with and working through as I tried to answer or listen to the experience of the people of this area. For my own photographic practice, obviously enough, I go for weird cameras, I try to make weird photographs, and I also go in, I do, one of the forms of photography I do is wet plate collodion tintype. I've got a few of those up here. It's one of our earliest photographic processes. And when you use this, when you do this, there's no negative generated, and there's no digital file. So if you destroy that piece of glass or metal, it's gone forever. The same thing is true of every one of these little portraits up here. They're made on Fuji Instax film, so they're made with a commercial product, but I've got this weird back, and I'll demonstrate, where I've got this instant film back on an old Hasselblad camera. So what I do, Donna.
Oh, great.
Look at me. Is I do that. And there's no, like I say, there's no digital file, there's no negative. So we can, when this develops, there, you can take it home. And when it develops, I can scan it, and I do scan some of them and make a digital file that way. But for the most part, they're one-of-a-kind objects. They're as unique and precious as the individuals that I work with to make the portraits. That's what I'm after. And that's really what this work's all about. It's about, I tell people that as a photographer, I have no interest in taking a picture of someone or someplace. I have a great deal of interest in making a photograph with someone. And that's the approach that I take to my portrait work. So I'll wrap up here. Before I do that, I learned a long time ago that successes don't belong to me, only the failures belong to me. Successes belong to the people that help me. So first I want to say thank you to the Randwick Council for the opportunity to do this. The arts staff especially has been fantastic. Avril, MLA, and the brand new Kate, who, yeah, she's and she used to work at Photo Access in Canberra, so I was super lucky to be working with another photographer. So thank you to the council for the opportunity. I want to say thank you to Robert and Rosemary King, who opened the doors of the Kujiko K Club to me and invited me into their home for a session. They invited a bunch of friends over, and I know a number of you are here this evening. And I don't know if you knew what you were getting into when you said yes to a glass of wine, but thank you for that. Also want to thank Fujifilm. Fuji has supported me. The prints that you see here, they helped with materials and the sponsorship to have these prints made. So I'm very grateful to Fuji, both the Instax and the big panos. And finally, Steve White at Base White Printing for actually doing the printing. Most of us have had the experience where you try to print something that looks great on your phone or your computer screen, and then you print it out and it's like, ugh. And there's a reason why you go to a professional, and Steve is amongst the best. And finally, Donna and Andy Lucas. The Lucas family has supported me throughout my time back here in Sydney. So thank you for joining us this evening. And at this point, I will hand off the microphone to Sepa.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Sepa Sama, who works with the subject of walking. I'm artist and researcher, or artistic researcher. So my work is making art and writing and research and trying to contribute to knowledge as an artist. One thing I wanted to ask, do you know what is 50 million steps? Anybody know? If we walked 50 million steps?
Around the world?
Exactly. So, but this is one of the findings of my research, because most of us walk that long, or more or less. But generally speaking, in a normal setting, we walk that. So there's a connection with our body and our planet, the scale and time. So it's one of my findings. I talk a little bit of points, of important points about walking, because I did my doctoral work on walking. So we had to step on shoulder of giants. And then I talk a little bit of that, and then later a little bit of my work and what I do with walking. Many of our important people, thinkers throughout time, have pointed at this topic. But not everybody, I would argue, can really quite frame it, because it's a subject that escapes us and is very close to us. It's like breathing, so we kind of overlook it. So one of the things in the book of Carrie Smith, The Wonder Society, she points out how Aristotle took students to the grove to have education, to have knowledge. So education used to be connected to walking, not to sitting down, to desks. Somehow we can call that birth of formal education. Another important book, there are many books on my website, which is on the postcards you can take. I looked at around 200 books. Some are direct books on walking, some indirect. So one of the important books which is popular is Wanderlust by Rebecca Solnit, A History of Walking. She starts the book with this idea of Eskimos when they're angry, which we have to use a better term, I know about this. When they're angry, instead of reacting, they pick a stick and they walk very long till the anger is gone instead of reacting, and they drop it. So they walk off their anger with the walking, so instead of reacting. And this book is a very good book, and she finished the book by saying history of walking is history of everything. So one can look through walking as a lens, everything you know, even a car, a city, street, pathways, wildlife, everything. We can look at it, and languages, through lens of walking. So it's a way of looking. Another important character, one of my favorites, is Nietzsche. If you know his story, he struggled in academia, and to a point he got sick eventually, and he had to leave, and he had to take a break. And during the time he was in academia, he published only one book, and he really criticized the desk, which is written in the book of Philosophy of Walking by Frederick Groh. This is another good book on walking. There's a chapter on Nietzsche. And after he left academia, he used to walk to the mountains, and he used to pick small notebooks, and all his books is written walking, like fragments. So walking was a way of being productive and let your thoughts move. And so he was very critical of this idea of being behind the desk all the time, especially now with the screens, and I'm also guilty of. And why walking? According to me, I think walking can be a form of knowledge. It helps us to know ourselves, our bodies, our languages and environments. A lot of, today we know a lot of our language also is embodied. So the body, just like Jack was talking, and he talked about step, he's using metaphor and path. So these are all embodied. So this is a very good way to know ourselves, our environments and languages through walking. So walking can be, and I would argue it's very important to know this before acting. So nowadays we really want, especially with technology, we want to change the world really fast, but then we don't know ourselves, we don't know our neighbors, our environment. So walking is very important, I would argue. We need to have a department of walking at UNSW. Please, make that and hire me. And so kind of my story as movement, when I was in my 20s, I used to have a Jeep and go to the mountains. Then in my 30s, I was with a bicycle. It was really important part of my understanding the world or escaping the world, I don't know. And then it was walking. And then one of my teachers said, what's after walking? So I look at in Sweden, we have these very nice walkers, you know. And I saw also Jack has this pinhole camera, and I installed it right there. And I would just press, and nobody knows I'm taking photos, you know. Because sometimes people are like, why are you taking photos and so on. So I think it's something he would help me to build this. And so it's like a journey. But by the way, like when you slow down, all of these movements with the car, bicycle stuff we absorb, and somehow we have better thoughts. But in a way, with walking, we see more. You know, so when we slow down, we actually see a lot of things that you can see through my photos. It would be much harder for me with a car or a bicycle, but on foot would be easier. So I did my master's in Los Angeles, my undergrad master at UCLA. I worked, one of the artists who really influenced me is Ed Rocha, Los Angeles artist, who worked with the small writings, minimal writings. And also he did documentation of Sunset Strip, which I also love music. You ask if you play music. So he documented this music strip in Los Angeles. So this was really my PhD proposal. I wanted to walk and do photo documentation. But one of the things really influenced me is that as a photographer, before I had a family of my own, I would go for walks like for 9 hours for the entire metropolitan. I did that in big cities. I would basically walk the entire day. And this was my method, because I'm not so skillful like him to be able to get good shots, but my trick was, okay, if I walk long enough, everything gonna meet, the right lighting, the right subject, everything. At one point, they will show up. Then I would take a good photo. That was my strategy. They all meet, they all have to come together. So that was my tactic. So, but then, I was very lucky when I was doing my doctoral work. My aesthetics professor, Dr. Agnieszka Bandura, recommended me very good books on walking. So when I started reading on walking, I got very interested. So I started writing like Ed Rocha, many fragments on walking. And I'll go on. And another thing I thought, I'll come back to that point. Another thing I thought about photography is also a lot like a dog. Like those people who have a dog, it takes you out. Like the other day we went to the beach. Normally maybe we don't go back there in the cliffs and stuff, but because of photography, you're curious if you can get some shots. So it's kind of like having a dog, like having a camera. It will just take you out there, force you to go out there. So I see it that way also. I see it also in the work of Japanese photographer Daido Moriyama. He has this character of a stray dog in Japan who follows. So this kind of became how he's an urban photographer. One of the things I do, going back to Nietzsche, is I also use my desk to a degree, but I try to use the stroller as my office. So that's my office. So the minute I step out, actually, by walking, the right things, my ideas. So I could be behind my computer and kind of be stuck. And you do things like you do, like your emails, your social media. But the minute I step out, kind of my work begins, especially because I work with this subject. So that really helps me. Also, I can carry my gear, my tripod, my books, and so on. So back to notes on walking. So I've written by now maybe around 100,000 small notes. Initially, I organized them into a lexicon. Dr. Bandura told me organize them in like a form of lexicon. And also to a point, I write so much that I didn't have photography, but also I was asked to include also photography. So they also feed each other. So because I create, also I've taken maybe more than 1 million photos, because I have many photos and many notes. That's why the book come in the picture. I organize these into books. So today, that's Call Home, you can take. It's a book of example of these types of work that I do. I read you 3 of these lexicon entries that I write. And the way I write also, there are multiple styles. Some of them are just sentences, some of them are like lexicon, some of them are just words. I document, like every day I was talking to you, listening, I write also. A lot of it is simple observations of everyday life. River, a moving line that remembers the land, because it's also remembering. Road, the ultimate archive. I like that, to see the road as archive. Map, the illusion of knowing. We were talking, like we look at the map, we think we know. Like you tell me where you live, I look at it on the map, but I don't know unless I come there. So map gives us this illusion. So in that book, you can see more of these notes. So I write on a daily basis. And the more I write, the more they come. It makes me tired from morning till night. So I go through more than hundreds per day. And like, please stop, you know. And so I'm always writing. So I always do 2 books at a time, or sometimes 3. So one, I call it like mother book. So it's like a lexicon on walking. I have a mother kind of document. And because I've moved, a lot of things have been destroyed, or my bibliography library. So I'm, in a way, I write notes in my phone, my computer. So if everything burns down, something will survive. You know, one of you will have one of the books. So it's hard to destroy me. But, so exactly, it's like, I feel like I'm like a squirrel, you know, they just put things everywhere. So I'm kind of like that. So, and Emil, I put the book in your drive too. So one of my favorite books. So when you pick that book, I have 3 books there. They're digitally free. One in Sweden, Poland, and Estonia. But the one in Estonia is my favorite. I was there in winter in pandemic. And one of the findings, because Estonia, for some reason, they didn't have fences. I felt very free. I was in a village called Vaskiala. It's like more than 1 hour outside Tallinn. And I would walk these lands freely on snow. And once I looked back, I look at my footsteps, I realized these curves. Then I was like, I know the work of Richard Long, who made a straight line by walking. Then I realized we don't walk in straight lines. You know, all our cities, this was an important finding for me, which you can see the photo in the book. And so some of the findings come through these experiences, and you can see a lot of documentation and also writings in that book. This was part of Copper Leg Art Residency. Those of you are artists, I also recommend it too. It's a very fantastic place. So for today, I made Call Home. And this is because we are also new here. It's been just 1 year, recall. So somehow I got the book and put it in my family's kitchen, first printed. So it's like Call Home. And we just moved to a new place. So calling this place home. And honestly, I'm very inspired by Australia. I think the landscape, people, and the language, these things really inspired me to be here. And so I'm already working on my next book. It's called Shared Path, which is based on a map. So now what I have with the flags is half Europe, half Australia. But my next book will be very local. I'm going to making a pocket book. I'm writing, for example, I look at in the corner, you have Lollipop Lady. You know, those people, I didn't know this term, it's cool. I wrote also a lexicon entry about this and also a poem. So I also write few poems. So they have 1 poem, in the next one I have few. I wrote a poem about them. So, and tomorrow they come to the show too. So I talk to them. And so these are like from the local language and also local documentation, the pathways and wildlife and listening and so on. So I'm formulating the book. I also ordered Thoreau's Walden, famous book in American literature. So I think that work also inspires me to work on. And so I also invite you to read and write some of my books. Also, I have Notes on Walking, 2 books. And I have also Carreri's book there, Walkscapes. So read a little bit in this style of writing and contribute to me. I have also read guest notebook, write to me. Also, you can read, you can also write in any language as you like. But for my writings, I always draw from multiple languages. For example, from Italian, I wrote passeggiato. Is it correct? And passeggiato, so that's walking after eating. So there are, like we talked about this idea of parsezadan, wonder, flaneur. There are translations, but they're different. You know, I can see them, like you look at the same word in 3 languages, they're different. So it's also important. So this work alone be infinite if you look at multiple languages and metaphors and so on. Like how you use your foot in other language also use metaphors, but sometimes they mean different. They use different ways, their body and foot and so on. So it's nice to look at multiple languages. Like I wrote about hudur in Arabic, right? This means the presence. You know, the walking also can bring you to this presence. And also I thought about for Jack and I, it's good if you can support us, because I see in Sydney you have these little pockets like in reserves. So I see a lot of art like nature. When you give it support, it comes to life. So if you can support us. And thank you for being here today. I'm also very thankful for this opportunity to work. And let us know if you have questions and comments. That's it. Thank you.
I'm always interested in the idea of landscape.
Yep.
In the Northern Territory, all I lived for quite a few years, a lot of Aboriginals, Indigenous Australians, objected to us, white folks, painting that landscape because they owned it. Thank you. They were the owners, they were the custodians, and they had a very deep relationship with that land. They saw us painting the landscape as an attempt for us to claim that landscape. Do you have any feelings about that approach to things?
Well, I can understand, especially there are a number of cultures and instances where, especially realistic portrayal of a thing is sort of off limits. And what I mean is, in some of the Muslim world, you don't do pictographic representations of an animal or a person, because creation of those things that's God's. That's not human endeavor. That's for God to do. And so for a human being to do that, I think for me, it's more, I guess my approach is more observational. And I guess what I'm trying to do, and especially with this work, right, cameras are like really weird time machines, because they make a record of a particular place at a particular moment. And that's what I'm trying to do here. And I work pretty hard, regardless of subject, I want to treat subjects with respect. I don't photograph people who don't want their photograph made. I'm going to break that rule in a second and make a photograph of all of you, but that's like, I'm not the street photographer who's, you know, photographing street people. I have some real ethical questions about that kind of photography and so on, but that's me, like, and I will own that. So does that answer your question?
Getting towards it.
I think it's like, if somebody said to me, you know, I don't want you making a photograph of this place, I'd be like, okay. Like, but I also think that if I'm choosing to make that photograph, it's because I'm searching for the beauty, whether it's like every single person up there is beautiful, when you introduce a camera, people get really funny. That's a whole other talk that I could give. But I'm looking for the beauty, and I want to share that beauty that I'm experiencing. That's why I want to make a photograph, not because I feel I have some claim. So that's me. Is that a better answer? Getting there. Yeah, I think like...
It's a complex question to begin with.
It's incredibly... And everybody's going to have, like, every photographer is going to have a different relationship to that and understanding of that, and what's okay and what's not.
Can I just comment? We've just come back from Central Australia, and having been there in the 1960s or late 1950s, the change is quite dramatic about what you photograph and what you don't. We used to think it was quite the thing to do to climb Ayers Rock, and I can say in retrospect that I climbed Ayers Rock, but I've never climbed Uluru. And it is quite clear now that the custodians of that land will tell you which areas are available for photography and which areas are not. So I think the world's changing quite dramatically.
Also in Sydney, so many of the original inhabitants were almost wiped out because of the diseases that were brought in, and all that the survivors can do is to try and hang on to as many cultural sites as they can. For example, there is evidence, different places where there were rock etchings, even in the East Coast, up near us, and even where the tools were sharpened, those that are left us trying to still preserve those sites, even as some kind of trace of the original inhabitants. So,
Well, even I've got, I did another project for the council probably 18 months ago, and I made all these pinhole photographs that are over here on instant film. And I titled the whole thing Coastal Artifacts. And part of my approach to it was like, you know how you find an old photograph in a drawer and it's weathered and you look at it and you wonder about the people in it, and someday all this is going to be gone and will be gone. And I was trying to make something that's like, when somebody finds these photographs in some drawer 50, 100, however far down the track, they'll look at it and go, how did those people live? How did they recreate? What was it like to be there? And cameras are both realistic, and they record only what's in front of them, and they also lie like rugs. So, yeah. Other questions?
this is wonderful.
Thank you both of you for the beautiful work. And Sepa, thank you so much for sharing your philosophy towards walking. It was really inspiring. I just wanted to know if there's a logic or methodology behind when you're selecting where to go, how long to walk, and the direction. I was just curious as to what goes on in your mind when you're making those decisions.
That's a very good question. I was thinking about that, so I'm prepared for that. And so I think also as I change through life, sometimes I thought you have to do these kind of heroic, bigger things, so like kind of Nietzsche going to top of the mountains. But now, time to time, I go to places like Yosemite or Blue Mountains. But today, most of my work goes around the everyday life. So I love helping my family and going around doing shopping, but going out of my way, going to do this work, Barrett House, and behind that rock, and so on. So it's kind of magic of wherever I am. I've also moved through land a lot. So Michel Desserteau has a book about everyday life. So, but this has changed. But time to time, I do also crazy things to call me. But does that answer your question? Yeah. So it's a very good question. But I think everyday life is so rich. Like when I look at language, today I was listening, I can pick up hundreds of words just today from you talking. So everyday life is very rich. I took a photo on Francis here, which I won an award with. I was taking my child to school. It's a leaf that hangs on a tree. I think it's in the book. This usually never happens. The pattern of the leaf follows the trunk. And as it was falling, somehow it cut to these patterns. And I took a photo, and the light and the rain. And so this wasn't me going to the Blue Mountain. It was right here. So I think the word I go to, I can spend rest of my life to work with Allison Park right here. It's a small park. It's enough for me. So thank you.
Saba, you alluded to the flags, and I know we spoke about them at length earlier in the week. Would you like to say something more than that brief comment, particularly about the one in Singapore, and how did your change of life? Yep, that's the one.
Also, feel free to pick them, and especially if you're dancers, because I work with mainly walking. So, yeah, so this one was we're in Singapore, we had to wait, I don't know how many hours. They have this big fountain, so it makes me contemplate. So contemplation too is something I do. It's you have to dedicate the time. And so we were coming to a new land. So this for me symbolizes the hope of coming to a new land, because maybe there's a connection with water and fountain. And when I was in Europe, if I had to do walk or workshops, it's a good idea to start with a fountain, which is also lexicon entry. And so this fountain has this effect that it's kind of raining. So for me, symbolizes a hope, and when someone like me, or maybe you, when you're international, this war today closed many doors to us, but there's always some light that you find, or like fire that we can keep going. And generally speaking, I wanted to work with the space, so we discussed with Avril Jeans, who we got the project, and I tried to work with the space. And these are not fine artwork, these are industrial material. So this is also a big influence of me with American artists. So to work with kind of like Andy Warhol, we work with like a soup can and so on. So these are very industrial things like the postcards or the books. And do I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well,
Ask one more question, it's a real loopy one. I'm an artist too, and it's a simple question. What do you think is the place and the purpose of artists and art in the current situation that we find ourselves in?
I'd say, again, from a photographic standpoint, I feel like the task of the photographer, the task of the artist, is to notice what everybody else is missing, to notice the beauty, and I mean beauty with a capital B, maybe some things that aren't, classically beautiful or whatever, but that beauty that's infused in things. To notice that, and to do something that taps everybody else on the shoulder and says, wait a second, you walk past this beauty every day. And do you realize how beautiful it is? And what are the beautiful things that I walk past, to get other people? To me, I want people to reflect, because they're surrounded by it. And they have access to it too. And I want them to point out to me what I'm missing. So to me, that would be my answer.
I would add also, in today's atmosphere of the world, many of our leaders divide our world. But through my research, if we know our human journey, that this actually really unites us, through languages, and not things were not separated. And that mirror I took is broken. Few of you like that. It shows our like these pieces. It shows a unity, of our parts, and we become human because we walked, and all of us did, and we went through the different parts of the world. So. Sometimes prejudices come for focusing at certain times or certain things. But if you look at the big picture, our human journey, a long journey, that then we can overcome those things. So in a way, by knowing can work against ignorance. So and many of our thinkers, even there is a whole group of deathbed writers like Rousseau, Thoreau. There's a list of writers who write on walking when they're dying. So they're telling us this is important, this subject. But it's not so easy. Many work with like Kierkegaard, Immanuel Kant, but their focus wasn't walking because they were using walking to do their work, philosophy, or to be in good shape and to survive and so on. But then they realized they want to give us the message. I think for us, this can really help us,
Thank you again for all your time, spending your Friday night with us. Thanks for coming and supporting us. If you want to keep supporting us, I've got a book for sale. I'll sell you prints too. Sepa's got some work, and I want to demonstrate. This is the maddest camera. So it's going to take everything from here to over here. There's two little things on top of this, and it's going to go really slow. It's actually pretty dark in here. There we go. So you can see with this camera, the lens tilts or pans around. I love it. It's so crazy, and it demands discipline from you. It's not. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I wrote a PhD too,
Oh, very cool.
and I called it Nomad Strategy.